Let's talk about shoulder pain in the low rack squat position. And what I'm going to try to do with today's post is try to give you guys what I think is the missing piece from this conversation. Because I've seen a lot of content covering this, and everybody's talking about the pecs, everybody's talking about the lats and how to stretch those out. I saw some good content from Squat University that talked about whenever you stretch the shoulder out, don't stretch it this way. You want to put your elbow on the wall because that creates a lot of torque on the shoulder when you stretch in this position. I definitely agree with that. We see a lot of people irritate their shoulders by putting a lot of torque on it during a stretch. But the one piece I think is missing is nobody is talking about the subscapularis muscle. Now that's one of the four rotator cuff muscles, and that muscle will internally rotate the arm, the shoulder. Now the reason this matters is when you're in the low rack squat position, ideally the arms are tucked into the sides, and we're trying to stretch the arm into external rotation to get under the bar. If the job of the subscapularis muscle is to internally rotate, and it just so happens that when the arm is at the side, it's one of the main limiters to external rotation, meaning as you externally rotate the arm here, it will build tension on the subscapularis, and that's going to create a lot of stabilizing force here, but it will limit that external rotation more here at the side than it will up in this position. So the subscapularis is particularly taut whenever you externally rotate down here versus up here. That's why a number of you, when you're doing stretching, you're stretching your pecs out, the arm is up in this position, and you seem to have pretty good external rotation up here, but you don't have it whenever you tuck the arm down at the side. There's less external rotation. One of the reasons can be the subscapularis muscle. So rather than just stretching the pecs and just stretching the lats, make sure that if you're actually performing this maneuver, that the subscapularis isn't getting irritated. Here's a couple of ways to test to see if the subscapularis is irritated. One, you can put your hand on your belly here, and you bring the elbow forward. If you push the hand into the belly when your elbow's forward, and you feel some of that shoulder pain, maybe it's right here in the front, maybe it's in the back, around the shoulder blade area here, if that bothers it, or if your arm is behind you in this position and you try to push off like that against an object, and that also happens to irritate the shoulder the same way that it irritates whenever you're doing your low rack squat, you might have subscapularis irritation. So again, that muscle is an internal rotator. So this is a very easy way to irritate the shoulder when people are stretching the heck out of it to get into the low rack squat position. They're ignoring the rotator cuff and they're just focusing on pecs and lats. If you find that subscapularis is irritated, the best way to train it is to do internal rotation at the side here, and you can also train internal rotation up at this angle. Now, just to give you guys another little piece of advice here, a lot of people, when they do rotator cuff training, I see them doing the internal rotation, but one, they're limiting the range, and they're kind of going mid-range. I think that's a mistake because if you're expecting the subscapularis to get to where it's fully stretched and still be able to activate during a squat, like the low rack squat, then your training needs to reflect that motion. So when you're doing internal rotation at the side, when you're resisting a band doing that, let the arm fully come out into full external rotation. Don't limit it to here and just whip this band around thinking that's going to target it. Another thing I would do is for many of you, when you first start addressing the rotator cuff, we tend to kind of say maybe slow this movement down just a little bit because it'll help you actually focus on what you're doing. Meaning, if you're just whipping this band around, a lot of you are just using your pecs and you're using your lats and the arms going up and down like this. If you really want to isolate internal rotation, make sure that's exactly what you're doing when you pull the band in, and it's not just the whole arms going in and out. When people whip the band around really quickly during a warm-up, that's what I find that they're doing. Another disadvantage of doing the high-speed maneuver here with the band is that we may not be developing good tension in the muscle throughout the full range. So if the band's just whipping you around, we may lose tension out here, we may gain it in here, and it may be all over the place in between because the rubber band is giving us this whipping effect. So again, that's another reason why you can slow the movement down to make sure you're getting good tension throughout the range. Just because you start that movement slowly doesn't mean it needs to end there, but believe me when I say many of you are losing control of that muscle just whipping the band out and in like this. So, to recap, the subscapularis muscle will limit external rotation at the side more than it will up at this angle. If you're having the shoulder pain during the low rack squat, test this muscle to see if it has a load problem. Push here, push here. If it's irritated, try internal rotation exercises. and see if you can improve the load tolerance.